Welcome to this edition of the Whole Health of the Rob Carney podcast, and on this episode, I'm joined by Xavi D of Organic Health Movement, and we talk about digestion, gut health, nutrition, organic farming, and how all things related to farming affect our body from the soil up. And so I hope you enjoy this podcast, and off we go. Without further ado, we have another edition of the Whole Health of the Rob Carney podcast with our very special guest, as always, Xavi D. And on this episode, we are going to specifically talk about the gut health, what the gut is, and how it really affects everything we do in life. So, Xavi, welcome aboard, my friend.
Thank you so much for having me once again, my brother. It's going to be a fun one.
It always is. So I want to start off would you mind giving us an overview of what the gut is, how it functions, and kind of just a little visual for people, where it starts, where it ends, and kind of what that process looks like?
Absolutely. So the gut is not only a really big topic nowadays in health circles, but is getting more and more focus for its role in our overall health. I like to make it simple, and I like to say the gut, emotionally and physically, is where we absorb and integrate the outer life into our inner world. So through food, nutrition, hydration, all those aspects of what we bring into ourselves are absorbed through the gut. And our gut's role is to absorb, eliminate, assimilate those things that we bring in with efficiency and ease. So when we refer to the gut, there are a few different physical components of that. Really, the gut and digestion begins with our thoughts, actually, in our brain, the way we interact with food, the decisions we make around food. We, of course, have the mouth, the saliva, the esophagus feeding into the stomach, where hydrochloric acid is released and digestive enzymes are released to break down our food, bile as well, released by the liver. And then we go down into the small intestine, where the food is assimilated through the microvilli, which are like little finger-like projections from the wall of the small intestine. And they form a really tight border, so only select particles can get through into the bloodstream, where they are sent to the proper parts of the body that need them to not only rebuild themselves, but to function properly. The waste products of that process then go on to the large intestine, often referred to as the colon. And that's where they are prepared to be eliminated through the body. And overall, that's kind of a simple picture of the way that the gut works. And of course, we'll get into a little bit more of the specifics, but that is what we refer to as the gut, and the role of that in our health is pretty vital.
Yeah, so it's obviously an essential part of being a human. I mean, if we can't absorb the food that we're eating, as we've talked about before, is if you're eating the healthiest food on the planet, but your gut cannot process and assimilate and absorb and eliminate everything that's going into your body, you could be eating an all-organic, local diet and still be feeling like shit. Because if you're not absorbing it, it's not going to matter. So in terms of healing the gut and having an optimal gut, what is something that you recommend to people to optimize their absorption of all these healthy foods that we're putting into our body, as well as elimination? Because that's an important part as well of the process, is detoxifying the body and letting go of anything that does not serve us. So what do you recommend in terms of people to optimize their digestive health? Is it probiotics? Is it drinking lots of water? What type of things you typically recommend?
Right on. Great question, Brother Rob. I like to break things down into threes to make it really simple and easy to follow. Number one, I think overall we have to look at the role of stress in our health and how that affects gut motility, how that affects the microvilli of the small intestine. The HPA axis, hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis, is really intricately involved in the way in which our gut is able to absorb and assimilate foods. So let's just take, for example, somebody who's highly stressed, who is not regulating their blood sugar well, who is secreting a lot of cortisol and stress hormone. Whenever you're sympathetically activated or there's stress hormone released in the body, your digestion and assimilation is downregulated. It's a survival mechanism. So we have to consider that most of our population is highly stressed and doesn't have a solid framework for which to deal with that stress as it comes up in their life. I really love breath work, meditation, earthing, tai chi, qigong, to harmonize the biological oscillators, one of which is the gut, because in doing so, we actually lower our stress level, stimulate the rest and digest function of our nervous system. And that's really important because most of the time, even if you're not working out and you're not moving, you can still be secreting a lot of stress hormone just based off of your thoughts, your thinking, and your interaction, your perception of the world. So number one, we must take a look at stress. Number two, food intolerance is huge. So nowadays we talk a lot about gluten. We talk a lot about food intolerance in terms of maybe genetic or specific epigenetic mutations within the body that don't allow you to properly absorb and assimilate certain foods, causing irritation of the gut lining, causing an autoimmune response. Because like I mentioned, that small intestine, if the border gets damaged by food intolerance, you'll have undigested food particles in the bloodstream that end up getting tagged by the immune system as a foreign invader. And when that happens, you open yourself up to a whole host of inflammatory processes in the body. So you have to take a look at, our inner wisdom. What are we digesting? What aren't we digesting? And I encourage people to listen to their heart and to listen to their experience, because everyone out there who's in the world of holistic health has a different idea about what type of diet we should be following in order to avoid that immune reaction, to properly absorb our foods. But I say just listen to your body and figure out what really works for you. Number three, making it simple with hydration, baby. I think a lot of us are dehydrated. We drink crappy water, bottled water filled with xenoestrogens from the plastic. We drink water that's filled with fluoride, mercury, and heavy metals, whether we know it or not, especially if it's tap water. And then even if you have a good quality spring source, you have to consider that reverse osmosis water, or oftentimes spring water, doesn't have enough mineral content in it for you to absorb it. And the way that hydration works is when you're dehydrated, you also open up the stomach to experience a host of issues. You can dehydrate the mucosal lining of the small intestine. You can open yourself up to the hypersecretion of HCl. There are a whole host of things that go along with hydration. In fact, I was just reading a study this morning that said a really large portion of a cohort in a popular Western medical hospital experiencing abdominal discomfort all reported on their lab results signs of severe dehydration. So it can cause abdominal pain and discomfort as well. So just making it simple. Look at stress, look at food intolerance. What are you digesting? What are you not? And keep yourself hydrated.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that, man. I really like that little triangle you just painted there. And I think that with the stress too, going back to that, for people that aren't familiar, as you mentioned, the sympathetic nervous system. So that is our fight or flight mode. And that's something that has been extremely important in our survival as a species. It's pretty much what turns on adrenaline, cortisol, all of the hormones that allow us to turn off what's unimportant in a survival situation, which oftentimes is digestion. So you're not going to be thinking about digesting your food if you're running from a tiger to save your life. So the sympathetic nervous system is extremely valuable, but in our day of chronic stress and chronic overworking, undersleeping, malnourishment, that sympathetic nervous system can become detrimental to our overall health. And that's where doing the things like the meditation, the Tai Chi, we're activating the parasympathetic nervous system. So the parasympathetic nervous system is quite simply the rest and digest. So that's where you're not focused on secreting adrenaline. You're not focused on secreting cortisol because you're not running from a tiger. This is where you're taking the time to relax and digest the food, to repair the body. So with that being said, as we're reducing stress, we really want to focus on not doing things that are stressful. when we're trying to digest our food. And you think of the classic example where people are eating lunch and then they hit that 2 p.m. crash after lunch. And there's many things that can cause that. But I think most commonly, it's that people are eating food and they're rushed while they're eating because they have a limited time frame to eat their lunch. And then they're going back to doing work, which is stressing them out. So not really fully digesting their food. And along that is oftentimes they're eating the wrong foods. So that's going to cause a lot of issues, as you say, with the intolerances. And a number of years ago, I actually worked with a group and we did a food inflammation test. So it was a blood test, and you pricked your finger, put your blood on the samples, and it basically tested for 132 different foods. And it measured how much your blood reacted with the various proteins for these 132 different foods. And it's interesting too, because what people deem as healthy, as you're saying, you got to be careful who you listen to, because someone might go ahead and say, oh, cabbage is the best vegetable, apples are the best fruit, whatever the case may be. And for me, when I had my blood test done, I was highly intolerant to squash. And that's something that someone would say, oh, you eat squash, squash is healthy for you. But for me, I eat squash, I get headaches, I get stomach aches. And it's because that is causing stress in my body. It's causing inflammation in the body. And as you said, it really does come down to listening to your own body. Because, yes, there are general trends. Maybe squash is healthy for 90% of the population, 80% of the population, whatever the case may be. But you may be like me, and squash is terrible for you. It makes you feel like garbage and gives you these symptoms of headaches and nausea or whatever the case may be. So as we're looking at these studies of what is quote unquote healthy, what is good for us, we need to be very mindful of the fact that that's a generalization. And yes, that's going to be true for most people, but you may not be most people. Your clients may not be most people. So taking an individual approach, I think, is absolutely vital. We can't generalize everyone. We can't generalize everything, every food. And I think that by using this little triangle, and then as you said with the hydration, if we're focusing on lowering our stress, getting into that parasympathetic nervous system where we're able to rest and digest, we're focusing on eating foods that are good for us, not good foods that are told to be good for us, and we're really taking the time to listen, and then taking the time to get quality water. And as you said, there's some spring water nearby to me that I love. But I do like to put a little Himalayan pink sea salt in there because it does give a little bit of the vitamin boost in there. And I think it is important to be very mindful of the water, because I think people say like, oh, like I just drink tap water. Like, what's the difference? And depending where you're from, maybe there is no difference. Maybe you're the best tap water out there, but most of the time that's not the case. And so you got to use a filter or add some salt in there, some sort of minerals to kind of boost up that water. And as you said, with the water bottles, a lot of times they're heated up when they're being transported, whether it's in the back of a hot truck, and some of those chemicals are leaking from the plastic into the bottle. So I think the best place to start, in my opinion, for water is getting a glass bottle. And what I actually use is I'll get some kombucha bottles, and when I finish them, I use them as water bottles after. So I'm not buying new glass bottles if you're trying to be cost effective. And that way you're not only reusing, but you're recycling those bottles, and those last me quite a while in their glass. They can be hand washed or in the dishwasher or whatever. But point being, if you focus on lowering your stress, let's use the lunch example, you do a little 15 meditation before you eat lunch. You eat your lunch and just kind of relax for a little bit. Give yourself the time not to be rushing, not to be working while you're eating, or even right after you're eating, because you want to have that time to digest. And making sure that you're listening to your body. If you're getting that 2 p.m. crash, maybe there's something in your lunch that's not the best for you. Or maybe it's just the wrong timing. Maybe you're having too many carbs or too much fat or too much protein at that time when you're just sitting. So it really does come down to food journaling and kind of taking that time to track your food you're eating and your symptoms and all the whole list of things that we can do to really get more in touch with our body. But at the end of the day, I really like what you painted the picture over that triangle there. And I would like to know from you, Mr. Xavi, what is the 3 things that you do let's not three, let's say any things that you do in terms of a ritual while you eat. Is there anything you do before, anything you try to focus on while you're eating, and anything you like to do after?
Man, thank you so much for sharing all of that. I really resonated with what you had to say there. Food intolerance, parasympathetic nervous system, hydration, good quality water, being mindful. I resonate with all of that for sure, for sure. Three things that I like to do with my food. Actually, it's something that I could be doing a little bit more of right now, but it's something that I've kind of definitely ingrained in myself, is to, before I eat, just sit over the food and appreciate the earth, the elements, the farmers, the store, the stalkers, all of the different people involved. And by stalkers, I don't mean creepy stalkers. I mean food stalkers at the grocery store. Those people involved with creating the food and helping it to come to me. If you watch some documentaries about food, you'll see how intricate the process of creating food is, how hard farmers work to create wonderful organic food to come to you, how hit or miss that can be, and how delicate the balance of nature really is. So I like to honor the earth. I like to honor the farmers. I like to honor myself for preparing the meal. The people who have helped me buy that food, by working with them. It's a beautiful thing. And I think we deserve to acknowledge that each and every time that we eat, to just put our hands over the food, feel the food, express gratitude and appreciation for it. Number two, I think one thing around food that really helps me digest and absorb, assimilate it, is, like you said, to take a little bit of time just to calm down before I eat. Without a question, I notice that my digestion is impaired when I eat in a stressed out state. I'll share this little story with you because I think it's kind of fascinating. For the last couple of years, I've really struggled with a caffeine addiction and a real disposition towards coffee. And I was experiencing quite a few gut issues as a result of that. And I never really put two and two together. So I tried digestive enzymes, HCl, probiotics, food elimination diets, all of it. And what's really fascinating to me is that my gut did not improve until I took out the caffeine. And the caffeine is a serious sympathetic nervous system stimulator. And I find that to be interesting because you can try everything with some of these holistic health tips that we know of. But really, at the end of the day, your stress level determines how well you absorb or assimilate those foods. And, you may be incorrectly diagnosed with a gut pathology like SIBO or IBD or Candida, for example, when in reality, you just need to monitor your stress levels and bring those back into balance. Now, of course, there are acute symptoms and cases where you do need to consider something more global and intense than just eliminating caffeine. But that being said, I just have to say, if you're taking care of yourself and you're calming yourself down before you eat and you're taking time to appreciate the food, it makes a big difference. And then finally, number three, I find that I eat best when I kind of moderate my foods to a high protein, lower carb, and high fat type of ratio. So we call that primal pattern dieting in the Czech system, metabolic typing in some other circles, just eating according to my genetic needs, which in most cases is high protein. But I think what's really important for me in that is to choose really high quality organic sources of whatever I'm eating, because that ratio can change. So if I'm going to eat meat, I want something that's local, grass-fed, organic, something where the animal itself has been raised with care and love, because you can feel that love. And I think people don't realize that energy exists in each and every little physical thing that we interact with. And then when you appreciate the love within it, you get the love back. So supporting local farmers is huge, not concentrated animal feeding operations where they're fed plastic and sewage and steroids and tons of bullshit, because increases the profit margin of a select few to the detriment of all. I'm not about that. I like supporting local. I like eating organic food. I think it tastes better, and I think it's better for me. So those are my three little reasons.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And anyone who's listening and thinks that he's exaggerating when he says that the animals are eating plastic, sewage, that is real. These animals are literally living in their own shit. Most of them can't even move, that they get deformed legs because they're so pressed up against other animals that they're not even able to grow properly, that they're so deformed. And some of them, you see these horrible pictures. And having worked on a number of farms, I mean, it's disgusting to be around when they're spraying chemicals on crops, which obviously goes into the animals that are nearby as well. They're shoving antibiotics up these animals to prevent them from getting sick. And then, as you said, the energy that we're eating, so we're eating this animal, we're consuming their essence, their energy. Those antibiotics and all that stuff stays in their cells. So if we're injecting our animals with antibiotics, and that's going into their muscle tissue, and we're eating their muscle tissue, all of a sudden we're getting some antibiotics in our system as well. And what antibiotics do in the grand scheme of the gut is it's basically like an atomic bomb. So you drop this atomic bomb into your gut, and it kills everything. It doesn't care if there is the good and the bad. And to backtrack a little bit, we have a balance of good and bad bacteria, for lack of a better word. The good being the probiotics, the pro-life, the ones that are helping us to digest, assimilate, and eliminate. And typically they say the ratio is anywhere between 80 to 90% good bacteria to 10 to 20% bad bacteria. And the bad bacteria play a very vital role as well, because it's like the weight training for our good bacteria. It's weeding out the weak ones and making the strong ones survive. But we need that firm balance of about 80-20 to ensure that they're getting their workout in, but they're also not overwhelmed. And when the antibiotics come in, they're wiping out everything. And so it gives a fresh playing field. So instead of 80-20, now it's 0-0. And oftentimes we lose a good percentage of all those hundreds of thousands of strains of bacteria that we have in our systems that never actually come back because we've completely eliminated them. And that also gives the space, as I said, with a 0-0 playing field instead of 80-20, now the bad bacteria might be able to manifest in the body when they come back. So when the animals have these small little doses of antibiotics in them, and we're getting a constant dose of small antibiotics, plus if we then get sick and we're put on a stronger antibiotic that's made for humans, all of a sudden we're just constantly wiping out our balance of our microbiome. And in the long term, that's going to cause some chronic issues, as over time, as I said, if you're constantly wiping this stuff out, you're losing a lot of these helpful strains. And we noticed that with organic food and eating local foods, if you grow your own food, a lot of these microbes live in the soil. So if we have healthy soil, we're going to be having healthier food, and we're going to be having more healthy microbes. So I had a nutritionist I used to work with who actually said if she could prescribe it, she would recommend people to eat dirt. And the reason why that is because there's a lot of these healthy microbes in the dirt that actually help to build up our gut flora. But the issue is you can't be doing that on a traditional farm. It has to obviously be an organic farm. So when I grow my own food and there's dirt on them, I'm like, hell yeah, and I'll eat. I'm not washing that off. I'll eat that, but it's only when I know exactly where the source is coming from. I'm not recommending people go out and eat dirt because I don't want my stories coming back to me and saying, "Oh, Rob told me to eat some dirt and I got sick or whatever." So if you're growing your own food at your own discretion, if I was there, I would probably eat some of that dirt on my carrots or whatever you're plucking out of the ground there. But with that being said, we got to be very careful with the foods we're putting into our system. And as Xavi just said, having organic food, I believe, tastes better. And I don't know if that's because I feel the connection more with the food. I feel that it's more pure, it's healthier, and I have a very good connection with my body because some people say they can't taste the difference. And my thought on that is that people are not as connected. They're not taking the time to really calm themselves before to tune into that inner awareness, to notice how they feel after. And I think a lot of that just comes with practice, taking the time to tune into ourselves through meditation, through food logging and journaling, to notice how these foods are making us feel. Because every person I know that eats organic consistently, they're the ones that say they notice a difference. But the people who just eat it sporadically say, "Oh, I don't notice a difference between organic and non-organic." But as we make this a lifestyle, and as they say, a lot of these things take time. So whatever the number is, there's so many numbers for what makes a habit: 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, whatever the number is. You're not going to notice a change right away. And by changing your diet, a lot of times there's going to be a little period of detoxification where you might actually feel worse. And I think that that's an interesting area to go into, because a lot of times when I've talked to people, they say, "Oh, I started eating healthy and now I feel worse." But that's a lot of times is because you're releasing a lot of toxins that are in your cells now that you're fueling yourself with this high quality organic food. So I would like to know your thoughts on that in terms of, have you noticed people that have gone from eating traditional American diet, the sad crap diet, if you'd like to go into that, and what that transition is like for a lot of people that you've worked with.
For sure, man. I love that you mentioned the soil, because the soil is really where this relationship between our food, our ability to relate to the growing process, our ability to relate to agriculture is reflected. It's kind of like a mirror of how well we're working with the earth. You mentioned that essentially the nutrients and minerals in the soil are directly related to the quality of the food that we are eating. I think in HLC1, you might remember this. Paul talks about the paramagnetic relationship between the soil and the plants. And magnetism really is just how well something attracts or is repelled by another. So the earth itself is an electromagnetic phenomenon. And the soil has an electromagnetic relationship to the cosmos, and more nutrient-dense soil has higher paramagnetism, which can bring about better water retention, nutrient utilization in plants, so forth and so on. And most people don't understand that. So they may be eating celery that's conventionally grown, sprayed with a bunch of crap, so forth and so on, but they don't realize that they're actually really impacting the earth in a negative way. And of course, they say, well, where are the studies? We need to see evidence of this. If you look up some statistics on the quality of the soil, our soil is fucked. I mean, we have so intensely monocropped and depleted the soil of its nutrients. We're in kind of a big crisis mode here. And I think for, as you mentioned, clients that are making a transition from eating a conventionally grown sad crap diet to something that's organic, local, sustainable, not only are they going to be fuller faster because they're eating nutrient-dense foods, but the energy that you bring into your body in terms of that magnetism is huge. So magnetism, I relate to emotion. Imagine that not only are you drinking, let's just say in the example of a vegetable is mostly water. So if I were to give you a glass of water and then fill it with the pesticides, herbicides, fungicides, and all the other bullshit that we spray on plants in the name of crop growth and ask you to drink it, you wouldn't drink it. That shit's poisonous. But if I were to give you a stalk of conventionally grown celery, you would still eat it without realizing that celery is mostly water. So not only are you getting the shit pesticides and all that stuff in the water, in the food, you have to consider that the energy with which a huge machine sprays pesticides over the earth is a very low electromagnetic activity. It's something that carries a lot of dense emotion. It's not uplifting the planet. It's not giving it more life. It's depleting life. So you're also taking on kind of, from one perspective, like that karmic energy. So that's why I think of people who eat that sad crap diet not only are sad, but they feel like crap because they're literally bringing into their body the energy of industrial agriculture, which is a low vibrating, low productivity type of activity. But they're also just eating nutritionally dead food that's depleting the earth of its natural resources. rather than the feeling that I get when I eat organic food is like, I'm not only benefiting myself, I'm benefiting all whom I affect. And I think that's a huge quality of successful people right there. So if you're my client and I'm asking you to eat organic food, it's not from a place of dogmatism or this airy-fairy ideal where I think that you're going to change the world just by eating organic food. I know you're going to change yourself first. And I know that by changing yourself and feeling better in your body and having the nutrients on board to fuel your metabolic activity, you'll have a better chance of being positive, a better chance of being happy, and that will change the world. So it starts with the person, not necessarily just the ideal or the dogma.
Definitely. Yeah. Thank you, man, for sharing that. And just wanted to clarify for people who are not familiar with monocropping and monocultures, essentially what that is you're growing one crop in the same area over and over and over again. And say it's corn. So you're just growing corn in this field. You're only growing corn. Whereas in another environment, an organic farm, let's say, you have many crops and you rotate your crops because crops use certain nutrients from the soil. So you tend to find a balance on smaller scale farms or homesteads or any sort of small organic farm because it's not mass produced. So they have the ability to do that, and they have the awareness that that matters, because if you're growing corn in the same spot every year, all the nutrients eventually, as we said, a lot of the nutrition from the plant comes from the soil. So if you're draining all that by year 6 of growing the same one, that is not the same corn that was grown 6 years ago. One that might be smaller, they might be slightly duller in color, but the nutritional profile is going to be significantly less. Whereas if you're rotating and you're very mindful of the soil needs for each crop, you can rotate them and get fresh crops. Let's say you do every 3 years you plant corn there as opposed to every year. Now all of a sudden that corn is vital. You're getting your nutrients that you're expecting to with the corn. And that's where I think with a lot of the food labels that we have out there, it's very deceptive because that is assuming that every piece of food is the same. So we go into our corn and it says you get, or let's use a carrot because that's an easy example. You have a carrot and it says you get this percentage vitamin A and it's this many carbs. But if you're growing that on conventional soil, that vitamin A is probably going to be significantly less than if you're eating an organic carrot, which has been rotated with the crops. It's getting good soil. And if you tested those foods individually, you would definitely see a difference. But obviously, it's very hard to label things in a way that is unique to every food because that's pretty much impossible. You have to measure every single food, every single nutrient. So that's a generalization. So a lot of times, too, when people say that, oh, I'm getting all the nutrients I need, but you're not eating an organic diet or a high-quality organic diet, you may not be getting the nutrients you need, even though you think you are because the label says that. And I think it's very important to distinguish, as you said, with the organic versus conventional, and you're eating all these pesticides and herbicides. And what pesticides and herbicides do, they are killing creatures. The fungicides are killing fungus. The pesticides are killing bugs. The herbicides are killing other, what we call weeds, even though they can be something like dandelions, which are very beneficial to humans. So what you're doing is then you're killing a lot of the stuff in our own cells, a lot of the stuff that actually is beneficial, the things that are causing our hormones to be disrupted, causing our guts to be inflamed, because they're all these anti-life mechanisms going into us. And whether that's just energetically or the physical components that are going in there, or a combination of both, that is affecting us at a cellular level. And I think it's always interesting to me whenever people are eating salads and they have all the right intentions. I think they're eating healthy. But at the end of the day, lettuce is one of the highest sprayed vegetables, leafy greens at least, that I know of in terms of chemicals. And you look at the salads they're eating, it's usually like a dull, yellowish looking, I don't even want to call it a leaf. It's just, it doesn't look like you get an organic local lettuce from your garden or from a local farmer. You wouldn't even think it's the same plant. Just it's greener typically. I mean, obviously it depends on the species you're getting, but for the most part, it just looks more vibrant. The organic food typically looks better, tastes better, and feels better. And as you said, with clients who think that, oh yeah, you just want me to eat organic, it's this hocus pocus shit and it's not going to change the world, whatever. But one thing I really like about organic farms too, and I'm talking about the small homestead where we're rotating our crops, and the organic farm itself is like an ecosystem because it all works together. We're taking the chicken poop, the rabbit poop, we're using that as fertilizer, and then the pigs are eating all the scraps, and it's just this whole ecosystem that works together. And so as opposed to the monocrop culture, which is you grow one thing, you harvest it with tractors after it's been sprayed by helicopters or tractors or whatever spraying it, or people with their little gas masks on. It's an interesting way of looking at it. And then I think that everything is an ecosystem. The earth is an ecosystem. Our country is an ecosystem, and how everything we do affects someone else in one way or another, whether we think we are or not. By choosing to buy organic, not only are we shifting the market, but organic food has gone down in price quite significantly in the past 5 or so years. That's because, as it's gaining traction, because it's supply and demand. And so by voting with our dollar per se, we're not only supporting those local farmers, but we're making that more of the norm. And by making that more of the norm, we are shifting the consciousness of the planet. As we're becoming more aware of that, we're shifting the health of our soil, shifting the nutrient profiles of our foods. We're shifting the way our bodies feel. And at the end of the day, we are building the ecosystem that is our body. And the ecosystem within our body starts in the gut. And that's what this all comes down to. You can blow it up to the planet, the galaxy, however big you want to go. Those are all ecosystems, but it all comes down to our own little microbiome within our own little gut that's in our body. And things like hormones, neurotransmitters, our immune system, all stems from the gut. So if we're not taking care of our gut, we're likely going to be obviously stressed. We're going to be inflamed. We're going to be getting sick more often because our immune system can't function, because it's dealing with stress and inflammation. That's what it's trying to deal with first. And then something comes in and throws everything off balance. And we're not going to be feeling good. A lot of depression cases stem from the gut because we have a lot of issues with releasing things like dopamine or serotonin, which a lot of that stems from the gut. Obviously, there's a connection in the brain as well, but our gut and brains are huge pieces in our heart. As you said, the three oscillators that you're talking about earlier, that's a very vital part. And I think we tend to think of the heart and the brain in Western medicine as kind of being everything in terms of where everything starts. It's our brain. We think with our brain and we feel with our heart. But most of the time we feel with our gut. And I think that's the interesting thing is there's no coincidence that we have gut instincts. We get the butterflies in our belly. We feel emotions in our gut because a lot of those neurotransmitters and hormones, as I said, stem from there. So I would like to know your thoughts in terms of how all this ties together and how we can focus on making ourselves less stressed, happier, and healthier as a whole by focusing on the gut.
Love it, brother. I really appreciate that contribution. I think a whole lot of what you mentioned there is just fantastic. And I know there's probably a lot that many people want to probably dive deeper into. So if you want to check out a great source of information about organic farming, I recommend the Rodal Institute, rodalinstitute.org, I believe. Yes, indeed. RODALE. And so like you said, the gut is really where all of this manifest. Like I said, the soil is a mirror of our interaction and how effectively we are living in harmony with nature, which is what we talked about last podcast. But the gut is also a reflection of how well we are living in harmony with ourselves and our cells. One of my mentors, who's been really influential in my understanding of the gut, loves to say that the way that you digest your food is the way that you digest your life. Your stress level is directly related to your ability to absorb and integrate food. And your stress level is also related directly to how you make decisions in the world. When you're stressed out and you don't have the metabolic reserves to make a meal, when you feel like it's too much energy, you're tired, you just want something to eat, you're more likely to make a poor decision around your food. To drive your car into a fast food drive-through, sit there, order some shit food that tastes delicious, feel good for 3 seconds while eating it, and feel like trash the entire time after that. But I think, Rob, you mentioned it well with the fact that the organic food that we're eating is really only as valuable as our ability to ingest it, digest it, assimilate it, and eliminate it. So what I recommend is that people really start to listen to their bodies and listen to their body's needs, because each and every person has a different genetic makeup that at the cellular level requires different levels of nutrient input. And so I mentioned it before, eat intuitively, but really what does that mean? To eat intuitively means to try to avoid the dogmatism of the paleo, the keto, the carnivore, the vegan, whatever it is, diets, and really start to consider, how do I feel my best? Because by feeling my best, I can make better decisions in my life. When I have a dream, I can align my decisions with that dream. And when my value system is strong in the presence of distractions like fast food, cakes, desserts, cookies, caffeine, whatever it may be, I can make the wise choice for my body. And I think it all comes down simply to self-love. How deeply are you loving the parts of yourself that want to self-sabotage, that don't feel worthy of health, that feel like they're, worthless pieces of shit that don't deserve to be acknowledged, nurtured, or cared for? How well are you interacting with those parts of self? Because each and every person has a different makeup of that. And based on how well you relate to those parts of yourself, you're going to be able to make better decisions around your food. It's simple. And when you do that, you're going to have a better chance of actually absorbing those foods, bringing them into the gut. You won't end up with diarrhea or constipation, which are issues of motility, which are related directly to the corticotropin releasing hormone in your brain, which is part of the stress response. You have to understand it all works together. And the stuff that we speak about may sound really simple, but it has a huge, huge backing of science, of physiology. So the truth is simple. It's also complex. In the end, it only matters how deeply you are loving yourself and whether or not you're making decisions that are aligned with your dream for health. And if you're not, you deserve more love, not less, and you deserve to go deep into those emotions that are holding you back.
Wonderful. Now, that was a incredible recap of everything we just talked about. And obviously, as you're now listening to this, I think that it's important to take away from this is it can be very simple. As you said, a lot of times it is as simple as stressing less, eating the right foods, and drinking quality water. Is that everything? No. But is that a good place to start? Absolutely. And a lot of times it is that simple. Maybe that is all you need. Maybe it is just the three things you need, and all of a sudden you're feeling better. Maybe you do need to take out the caffeine. Maybe you need to sleep better. Whatever the case may be, maybe you need to move more so your digestive system, the muscles around there are stronger from your exercise. We could go on and on about this all day, but what message do you want to leave our listeners with? What is the final message that people can take away from the world of gut health and nutrition and digestion?
Thank you so much, Brother Rob, for having me today. It's always a pleasure to share. I just want to reflect, one thing, that Rob and I are aspiring health entrepreneurs who are trying to create an empowered community. And that comes from the love within our hearts for ourselves. And it also comes from the love that we have for other people. I'm sure that we have aspects of our family and our community where health is just not present. And you see that in a really profound way. You see it in the attitudes, the disposition, the perception of those individuals around us. And we want everyone to thrive, to be happy, to feel good about themselves. And you can go deep into gut health. You can drink a cup of bone broth a day. You can have digestive enzymes with your meal. You can meditate, do the Tai Chi. It's all good. Those are wonderful expressions of love for self. But at the end of the day, what I really feel is most valuable is just being super honest with yourself. I think most people hold themselves back because they hear information like this and like, well, that sounds intimidating. I don't agree entirely. Maybe some of it's true. Maybe some of it's not. But they're not being honest with themselves about the fact that, they're scared to change. And I think when you're honest with yourself about being scared to change, you can make meaningful steps in the right direction. And by just saying to yourself, fuck, man, I don't know how I'm going to do this. I want to be healthy, but I don't know how to, and I need some help. And when you're courageous enough to ask for help, maybe this podcast comes your way. Maybe you listen to another podcast with a health entrepreneur. You listen to Aubrey or Paul or somebody like that. Maybe you read a book, Healthy Gut, Healthy You, Michael Ruscio, and you're like, oh shit, wow, the gut's pretty complex. I should probably start living for it. But I think it's the courage to be honest with yourself and to look yourself in the mirror and say, you know what? I deserve to be healthy, and the parts of myself that don't want to be also deserve love. And you just go from there and have a blast.
Wonderful. Thank you, brother. And for anyone who is listening to this that feels like they're ready to take the next step, they're curious about learning more about the gut, about food intolerances and all that, in my coaching, and I believe in Xavi's as well, we do have the primal pattern testing. So we can use some questionnaires to help you kind of narrow down what your best food ratio is. As Xavi said, he does best with a high protein, high fat, low carb, and I'm very similar as well, and that's what we consider the polar type and the check system. So that's something as well that is, if you are feeling a little confused, like you don't know where to go, you feel like you're ready to take the next step. We are both holistic lifestyle coaches. I'm in the Boston area. Xavi's in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And I believe we both do online coaching. You do online right now as well, correct?
Yes, sir.
So if you're feeling connected to either one of us, whether it be Xavi or myself or both of us, reach out to us and we can see if that's a good fit for you with a holistic lifestyle coaching program, because a lot of it does come down to lowering the stress. And I think that's both an area that both of us can really help with, and helping you with your nutrition, your hydration, your sleep, movement, thinking, breathing. So we would be more than happy to chat with you. So I'll put our contact info in the description here. And thank you all for listening. And Xavi, thank you for being on again, my friend.
Oh, it was an absolute pleasure. I highly recommend working with Rob if anyone out there is inclined to do so. A master at work and somebody who's going to make a big impact in the health industry in the future. So be on the lookout, enjoy yourselves, live authentically, just take a deep breath and keep plugging forward.
Thank you, brother. All right, everyone. Thanks for listening. Peace. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Whole Health with Rob Carney podcast with our guest, Xavi D. And so if you want to connect with Xavi, you can find him on Instagram at organic_health_movement. So his company is Organic Health Movement, and you can find that on his website, which I'll put in the description here. And if you're interested in working with a holistic lifestyle coach, both myself and Xavi do holistic lifestyle coaching online, and I am also in the Boston area, and he is in New Mexico, Albuquerque. So I would love for you to check that out and connect with us. And if you're interested in learning more, you can go to our Instagram as well as the website in the bio. And as always, this podcast is brought to you by our superfoods, our superfood groups, Purium Health Products, and Mushroom Revival. And so I've been given a discount code to give to all you listeners out there, so you can use the gift card code wholehealth at checkout, and that will save you $50 off your first order with Purium. So if you go to ishoppurium.com, you can find all the great products they have there, from organic green juices, apothecary, which is natural melatonin and antioxidants to help with sleep, vegan amino acids. And you can go to Mushroom Revival and use the same code wholehealth for 15% off your every order. So they have everything from reishi, which is the mushroom of immortality, cordyceps for energy. They have their Mush Zen blend, which has some herbs in there to help you relax and chill out. So I would love for you to check those out, hear what you think about those products, those superfoods. And I hope you enjoyed this episode. Please like and subscribe, and look for the next one.